everyone, and welcome to the deep dive. It's kind of wild when you think about it. We're living on this planet that's bursting with life, but how did it all get here? Like, seriously, how did we go from tiny microbes to, well, everything?
It's a question that's fascinated people for centuries, right?
Yeah, totally. And today, we're diving into the heart of it all, natural selection.
The engine of evolution itself. Get ready for some serious aha moments as we uncover the secrets behind nature's incredible diversity.
Okay, so let's break this down. I feel like we've all heard the phrase survival of the fittest, but what does that actually mean? Like, in the grand scheme of evolution, what are we really talking about here?
Right. It's easy to picture like the biggest, strongest creature just dominating everything, but honestly, it's way more nuanced than that.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Think of it more like this. Every single living thing is in a constant game of who can pass on their genes the best. That's what natural selection is all about. It favors the organisms that are best suited to their specific environment at that specific time.
So it's less about brute strength and more about being a master of, like, your specific domain, whatever that domain might be.
Exactly. You got it. And the key to this whole thing is variation. Within any species, you're going to have this whole range of traits, all thanks to tiny differences in their genes. Some might be a little faster, have slightly better camouflage, or maybe they're just a bit more resistant to a certain disease. It's all about those genetic variations.
It's like having a slight edge in the game of life that gives you a leg up.
100%. Imagine a population of moths, right? They're living on trees with this light-colored bark. Now picture this. A few of those moths are born with slightly darker wings, just because of a random genetic mutation.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
So, along comes a new predator. Let's say a bird with a knack for spotting moths. Who do you think has the advantage in this situation?
The moths with the darker wings, right. They'd blend in way better. The lighter moths would be, like, sitting ducks.
You got it. Those darker moths, they're less likely to become a bird's lunch. That means they're more likely to survive, reproduce, and guess what? They'll pass on those genes for darker wings to their offspring.
And then over time, more and more of those moths will have darker wings.
Boom. That's natural selection in action, my friend. That one tiny change can lead to a whole population that's adapted to their environment. It's pretty amazing.
I love that. It's like that quote, it's not the strongest of the species that survives, but the most adaptable to change.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
Natural selection is all about pushing for that adaptability.
Right.
And it all comes down to three main things.
Okay, hit me with it.
First, you need the overproduction of offspring. Think about how many eggs a fish lays, or the thousands of seeds a tree scatters. Most of them won't make it. It creates competition right from the get-go.
Only the strongest survive, huh?
Well, kind of. It's more like only the luckiest at this point. But then you've got those inherited variations we talked about, those differences that make every individual unique. And finally, you need a struggle for survival. Resources are limited. Food, water, mates. Plus, there's the constant threat of predators and disease.
So it's like this high-stakes game, right, with limited spots available. Those with the best traits, thanks to variations, of course, are the ones who get to play and pass on their winning traits.
You got it.
Speaking of winning traits, I know we've got some pretty wild real-world examples lined up.
Oh, yeah, we've got some good ones.
Yeah.
Because seeing these principles play out in scenarios we actually know, it really hits home how central this whole process is.
Totally. And sometimes those scenarios hit a little too close to home, like with antibiotic resistance.
Oh, for sure.
Right. The fact that bacteria can evolve to resist the very medicines we use to fight them, it's kind of scary, honestly.
This does feel pretty sci-fi, doesn't it?
It really does.
But honestly, it's a perfect example of natural selection happening right in front of us. It's just happening way faster than, say, those moths evolving darker wings.
Okay, so how does that work exactly? How do bacteria become resistant to antibiotics?
All right, so say you have a bacterial infection and you start taking antibiotics. Those antibiotics, they're like little assassins, wiping out most of the bacteria making you sick.
Okay, that makes sense.
But here's the thing. Within that massive population of bacteria, there might be a few individuals with a random mutation that makes them a little less susceptible to the antibiotic.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it might be a tiny change in their genetic makeup, but it's enough to allow them to, like, deflect those antibiotic attacks.
So it's like those few bacteria are wearing tiny little bulletproof vests. The antibiotic can't quite get to them.
Perfect analogy. And with all their competition gone, those resistant bacteria have a field day. They reproduce like crazy, passing on those resistance genes to their offspring. Pretty soon you got a whole new generation of bacteria, and these guys, they're basically immune to that antibiotic.
So that's why doctors are always stressing the importance of finishing the whole course of antibiotics, even if you start feeling better, right?
Exactly. If you don't take the full course, you might be leaving some of those tougher bacteria alive. And that gives them a chance to evolve resistance and maybe cause even bigger problems down the line. It shows how our actions, even with the best intentions, can have these unintended consequences.
Wow, that's a good point. It's a stark reminder that we're not just passive observers in this process. We're influencing it, often in ways we don't even realize. And speaking of influencing evolution, this resistance thing isn't just happening on a microscopic level, is it? This is happening on a much larger scale too, right?
Absolutely. We see it with pesticide resistance too, right? Where insects evolved to survive the very chemicals designed to wipe them out.
It's like a constant back and forth. We try to outsmart them and nature finds a way. But this whole idea of resistance, it makes me think, how do we even know all of this is happening? Like, it's not like we can actually see evolution unfolding, right? That's what I was wondering. We've been talking about all these amazing transformations, but where's the proof? How do we know for sure that evolution is actually happening and that natural selection is the driving force behind it all?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And the answer, it's more exciting than any sci-fi movie out there. The evidence for evolution, it's not just compelling, it's literally everywhere. It's woven into the very fabric of life itself. We're talking clues hidden in everything from, like, ancient bones to the inner workings of our cells.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. Where do we even begin to unpack all of that?
Well, a great place to start is with DNA, the blueprint of life.
Right, DNA. Everyone's heard of DNA.
Exactly. Think of it like this. Every living thing on Earth has a set of instructions inside it. It's written in the language of DNA. And get this. When we compare the DNA of different species, we find these crazy similarities.
Hey, are you saying that even though humans and like bananas look totally different, we share some of the same genetic code?
You got it. Isn't that wild? And it goes even deeper. The more closely related two species are, the more similar their DNA sequences tend to be. For example, humans and chimps. We share about 98.8% of our DNA.
Wow, 98.8%. So we're practically siblings with chimpanzees.
Well, not quite siblings, but you get the idea. It's more like distant cousins. But those shared genes, those ancestral hand-me-downs, they tell a powerful story, a story about common ancestry. This idea that we all came from a common ancestor way, way back.
So it's like a giant family tree, but for all life on Earth.
Exactly. We're all connected, my friend, in this big, beautiful web of life.
Wow, that's pretty mind-blowing. But DNA is just the beginning, right?
You're right, there's a lot more. If DNA is the blueprint, then embryology. That's like watching those blueprints come to life. Have you ever noticed how similar embryos of different species look in their earliest stages of development?
You mean like how a human embryo and a fish embryo can look almost identical at first?
Precisely. Those shared features during embryonic development. They're another huge piece of evidence for evolution and common ancestry. It's as if evolution is echoing those ancient origins in the very way we develop, even today.
That's incredible. Okay, so we've got DNA and embryology. What else?
Well, let's not forget about the fossil record. Talk about a blast from the past. Fossils are like snapshots of ancient life. They're the preserved remains of organisms that lived millions of years ago.
I'm picturing those incredible dinosaur skeletons we see in museums.
Exactly. And the best part, by arranging fossils chronologically, we can trace the changes in species over incredibly long periods of time. We can literally see how some species emerged, adapted, and sometimes even went extinct. It's all right there in the geological layers.
So it's like piecing together a giant jigsaw puzzle, with each fossil giving us another clue.
Exactly. And there's another layer to this puzzle, and it's hidden in plain sight. Our own bodies.
Our bodies, what do you mean?
Well, when we look at the skeletal structures of different species, even ones that look totally different on the outside, we see these crazy similarities. Like, have you ever seen those diagrams in biology textbooks where they show the bones in a bat's wing, a human hand, and a whale's flipper?
Yeah. Those always seem so weird to me, like evolution was just messing around or something.
Right. But it's not random at all. Those are called homologous structures. They're similar because those species all inherited that basic body plan from a common ancestor. It's just that over time, natural selection has tweaked and repurposed those structures to fit their lifestyles.
So a single design can be remixed by evolution to create all sorts of incredible things.
Exactly. Like evolution took a basic blueprint and just made different versions of it, each one fine-tuned for a specific purpose.
Yeah.
And sometimes those tweaks, well, they result in something that seems kind of useless, like our tailbone.
Oh yeah, the tailbone. It's like,
Yeah.
why do we even have that? We don't have tails.
I know, right? It's the perfect example of a vestigial structure, a structure that was functional in our ancestors, but it's lost its original purpose over time.
It's like those old gadgets we keep in the back of our closets. Like, why do I still have this?
Right, like a Walkman. Nobody uses those anymore. But those vestigial structures, they're like evolutionary souvenirs.
Yeah.
They tell a fascinating story about where we come from. But, it's not just our bodies that hold these clues. Adaptations go way beyond just physical traits. You're totally right. It's easy to get stuck thinking about physical stuff, but evolution sculpted some pretty amazing behaviors too.
Oh yeah, totally. Like, what about migration?
Exactly. Take bird migration, for example.
Blows my mind.
Right. These tiny creatures, they navigate thousands of miles, crossing continents, all to find the best breeding and feeding grounds.
It's like they have a built-in GPS or something.
It's credible. Makes
Yeah.
your average road trip look like a walk around the block, right? And there are tons of other examples of behavioral adaptations, too. Like, think about hibernation in animals, or even just something as basic as a baby's instinct to suckle.
Makes sense.
Right. Those behaviors might seem automatic to us, but they're actually hardwired into an organism's biology, passed down over countless generations because they increase the chances of survival.
It's true. We don't really think about those things as being shaped by evolution, but they totally are. It's not just about how you look, it's about how you act and react to the world around you.
Precisely. And then you've got physiological adaptations, too.
Oh, right.
These are changes to an organism's internal functions or processes. A great example, the evolution of venom in snakes,
Ooh.
right? This highly specialized adaptation, it gives them this incredible tool for hunting and defense. It's like they're living syringes.
And thank goodness humans didn't evolve that. I'm happy sticking with knives and forks.
Huh. I think we could all agree on that one.
Yeah, no venom for me, thanks.
But, it just goes to show the sheer diversity of adaptations out there. From camouflage to venom, migration to mimicry evolution has come up with some seriously creative solutions to life's challenges.
Yeah.
And when it comes to the biggest challenge of all, passing on genes, things get even wilder.
Oh, yeah. The birds and the bees, as they say. Or should I say, the survival of the fittest offspring. So what are some of the craziest strategies organisms have evolved to reproduce?
Okay, well, let's start with the two main ways to do it. Sexual versus asexual reproduction.
Okay, I'm calling it.
Sexual reproduction, with the mixing and matching of genes from two parents, it's like shuffling a deck of cards. You never know what you're going to get.
Right, and like we were talking about earlier, that variation is key. The more diverse the offspring, the better the odds that at least some of them will thrive, especially as the world changes.
Exactly. You get it. But asexual reproduction, where offspring are basically clones of the parent, that's got its advantages too. Super efficient, especially in environments that are pretty stable, places where variation isn't as crucial.
So it's like sometimes you want to play it safe and stick with what works, and sometimes you need to mix things up to deal with whatever life throws at you.
That's a great way to put it. And then there are all these crazy adaptations related to seed dispersal. Take those fluffy dandelion seeds that float on the breeze. Those things are practically begging us to spread them around.
Oh my gosh, yes. I used to spend hours blowing those as a kid.
Right, but those little parachutes, they're such a clever adaptation for spreading those seeds far and wide, increasing the chances of finding a good spot to grow.
It's like giving your kids a one-way ticket to a new life, but with a parachute for a soft landing.
Exactly. And let's not forget about parental care. Some organisms, they put a ton of energy into raising their young.
Yeah.
Mammals, for instance, they nourish their offspring with milk, making sure they have the best possible start in life.
It's amazing. From those dandelion seeds to a mama bear with her cubs,
Yeah.
it all comes back to making sure those genes get passed on.
It really does.
This has been amazing. I feel like I have a whole new understanding of natural selection. Thank you so much for joining us and breaking it all down.
You're welcome. I'm so glad you enjoyed it. Always happy to talk about evolution.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive. Until next time, stay curious.